Oh. I know you had trouble sleeping last night because you were wondering which tire lever should I buy. And I've got a lot here. This is about $350 worth of tire levers. Anywhere from a $3 bargain basement tire lever set up to a $35 Tyre Glider, which is supposed to revolutionize the experience of cycling for those that struggle with changing tires. I'm not going to be individually reviewing these, but more reviewing them as groups of tire levers and giving commentary to help you choose the right tire lever for your home shop or for when you're out and about cycling for emergency repairs. I've watched upwards of 60 videos on YouTube to help me with the research for this video. And the thing that I've noticed is it's either single product videos, let's say like Silca, for instance here, which whenever they enter a category in the bike industry, redefine it and re-engineer it and solve problems that you never thought you had. Or the new gimmicky type levers like Rehook, which is a complete reinvention of how the tire lever should work, or the Tire Monkey. Or comparison videos where, let's say, for instance, Cycling XX magazine will compare 5 levers and choose their best. I'm not going to do that here today. I'm going to look at them more as classes of levers and types. I'm going to be giving a whole bunch of pro tips in this. Number 1 is that you should be able to change whatever tire you have and put a tube in it at home with the gear that you plan to carry when you're out riding your bike. If you can't do that, seek help. Either more experienced cycling companions, maybe your local bike shop, or maybe do more research on tricks and techniques on YouTube. This is the diagram of a typical rim. You can either have hookless or rims with hooks or bead hooks. And when you've got your tire on, the bead is either going to sit in hookless here, or will hook into the bead hook. Now the idea when you want to take off a tire is that you get the bead down into the center channel. The idea is that the bead seat is a larger diameter than the center channel of the rim. So when you put the bead down into the center channel, you reduce the tension on the bead of the tire, which then allows you to create slack to pop the tire up and over the bead seat of the rim. In most of the instructional videos I've seen, the instructor just casually says, pop the bead. Well, sometimes that's not that easy, particularly if you have tubeless tires and or if you're running a rim insert. The best technique I've found for popping the bead, got pressure on here, is to grip the tire around the back and then put your thumbs on close to the top of the rim bead hook and give it a push. Now in this case I've got pressure in here, so I'll release it. And then I'll pop it there. If you can't pop the bead with the technique I've just taught you, you can go around the rim. I can assure you that the lock on the bead is not the same as you go around the rim. And just keep working it until you can find a spot that you can pop it. The next trick is, in a lot of the instructional videos I've seen, they just pop the bead locally, then try to get the tire lever underneath. I would recommend, just to set yourself up to succeed, is to pop the bead on the entire tire and then flip it over to the other side and pop the bead on the other side before you try to remove the tire. That'll create the maximum amount of slack to make it easier to get the tire off. The more slack, the easier it's going to be. Whenever you're yarding hard on a tire, always be mindful of the discs. Unless you're Reginald Scott, then you're just on rim brakes, but check out his channel if you haven't. But these are a lot easier to bend than what you think. I would never recommend yarding on a tire with your discs facing the ground.
The more slack you have, the better things are, particularly when you have rim strips. And they make a lot of crappy rim strips nowadays, and you just look at them and they peel off. So if you can actually pick up the bead and get the lever under it rather than forcing it under, the better the chance you're not going to destroy your rim tape. Once again, the more slack you have, the more likely you are, if you have a tube, to not damage it when you're prying the bead up over the bead hook. Personally, most of the times when I take out a tube, it is when I am putting the tire back on. So once again, be careful and get as much slack as possible. Generally what happens is you puncture the tube as you pinch it, as you're prying the last bit of the bead back under the bead hook. Looking at the YouTube verse, the best video I could find on installing tires is on David Arthur's Just Ride Bikes channel. And trust me, there's no evidence that he does anything but ride bikes. I mean, look at that upper body. I don't think he's been into a gym a day in his life. Link below. This seasoned mechanic stresses getting slack at all times during the process. He also finishes using a lever for the last 3 pops when putting it on. He does that, although a lot of professional mechanics will say we only use our hands because that absolutely minimizes the chance of damaging your rim strip or your tube. But he's being realistic, and most of us mortals, we will have to use a tire lever to finish things off.
Remember, I've used the word slack. The best way for you to get more slack, let's say if you're stuck, for instance, I'm using the tire monkey here and I can't push. You can take a simple tire lever and push it right into the area where it's stuck here, and you can easily cut more slack. See, I just push this thin lever in and pop it. Push it and pop it to make more slack, then voila. No problem whatsoever. One thing that concerns me about these gadget or gimmick levers is when you're putting the tire back on is how much tension you create along the last part of the tire. So what I would suggest always doing is trying to take some of the tension off before finishing it up. When I refer to the use of a lever, some are exclusively designed as carry levers, let's call them, when you're riding. Some are crossovers, where you can use them either in the shop or carry them along, although this one's quite portly. And some go more towards being completely dedicated to shop use. Please refer to the description for the exact weights of tire levers. The first type of lever is what I'll refer to as weaker plastic, probably best for road or gravel. Starting off with the 10-gram 1-Up Components lever. These two 15, 16, 17-gram, let's call them multi-tool levers or combo levers. And then these others here, which generally have a weight for 2 levers of between 23 and 27 grams. Weaker plastic levers tend to be not too stiff. The winner of that contest for the weakest lever is this more recent Schwalbe lever. Actually, the cheapest lever on test is way stiffer than the Schwalbe. It's hard to compare weights on what I'll refer to as our heavier plastic levers, but this Park is on a diet because it's hollowed out inside and weighs roughly 34 grams. This Muck Off isn't and is a rather portly 61 grams. And these other ones are in the middle. Also, they have different functions to them, but I'll highlight this Granite Designs, which only weighs 42 grams, considering you've got this chain breaker, let's call it, or not a chain breaker, but chain link popper in it. Once you go beyond these 34-gram Park levers, there's absolutely no issues with flex or stiffness on any of these levers. Up to the point where if you manage to break this, you're taking out your rim and or the bead of your tire when you do so. For steel or steel cord levers, weights vary anywhere from 37 grams for these more road-oriented Silca Ultimates, all the way up to 100 grams for these more shop tool-esque Park TL 6.3s. Now, in the case of these Parks, though, I'll make a point. If this is all you can get your tires off with, you might as well carry them while you're out riding. For the gimmick levers, we've got anywhere from 21 grams for the Tyre Glider. These are around 22, 25-ish, up to, for the Cush core bead popper, around 102 grams. But like I said before, if that's all you can get your tire off with, you should be carrying that when you're out riding. A pro tip for you is that if you're using any of these gadget or gimmick levers, always bring a second lever with you. I've seen a couple of videos where YouTubers have had to use a second lever to get the bead off or to get things moving first before applying one of these. I can only imagine the angst an industrial designer has when they're trying to figure out the optimal tip design for their tire lever. In this case, though, definitely as you go towards this direction, I'm more and more concerned about these tips snapping. And as you make them larger and larger, you reduce that risk, but then you can't get under the bead as effectively. Lever width. If you look, we go from narrow to ultra wide on the Tyre Glider. Well, this one can be a pain in the keister. I found that this was exactly no showstopper and didn't really notice a difference when working on my 3 test setups. It may be useful to hook a spoke when you're trying to get a difficult bead off, and there's many different designs. The one I'll highlight right away, though, which instantly eliminates any tire lever from consideration, is this weak hook design. And this is why. So these levers are automatically eliminated from any further consideration in the test. What's nice about this design compared to this design is you've got some redundancy if you end up in the unlikely event breaking one of these. This one is much more reinforced, although still a hook design, still recommended. This one also provides some redundancy. And right here we got Schwalbe, and I think this is just simply a bad design, particularly on their new tire lever for hooking a spoke, and it really doesn't work that well. And sometimes when you get over into these shop type levers, and I don't tend to use the spoke hooks at all when I'm doing that, if you look at my pro tips, there is no spoke hook. The length of the tire lever allows you to get more leverage. The only thing you got to be concerned about, though, especially for carry, is if said tire lever can fit in however you're carrying it. In this case, these two are rejected. I think the Muck Off may barely fit into this bag, but consider that when buying a tire lever. In the case, though, of the 1-Up, if you get any more leverage on this, you're just going to bust it. My preference is for levers that click together rather than that are just simply loose or use one of these sleeves. I wonder how long it would take me to lose this. When incorporating tire levers into multi-tools, you have to be careful. For instance, this one-up lever is weak and short. Its main function is to be a handle for this chain tool and to hold their multi-tool in place in this steerer tube assembly. That's it. If you're considering this a mountain bike tire lever, you're crazy. Whereas if you go over here, these one-up Daysavers, I think are more aimed at road and gravel. And this is a perfectly adequate tire lever for road and gravel based on me changing a couple of flats with them. I've never had an issue. The first job of any tire lever is to be a tire lever. So if it does other things at the same time, be careful that it's still a good tire lever. This one-up tire lever is essentially just a handle for that chain tool, like I've said before. I wouldn't count this as one of my two primary tire levers. Then we go to Granite Designs, and I can tell you the chain link popper on that lever is almost as good as this Park Shop Tool one. And the lever has some quite stiff plastic in it, and I've used this on multiple tire repairs. As for the Wolftooth, that's not going to give you a lot of leverage on thicker mountain bike rotors, but it's a okay emergency tool, and this is plenty stiff. Clever Designs, you can go and see the 57 different things that this tire lever will do for you. I put it in the description, but it works fine as a tire lever. I've had this on my gravel bike for probably 5 years. Daysaver, the same thing for my road bike. It's got all these functions to it, but this tire lever is a perfectly adequate tire lever. For Bead popper is a bit of an outlier. It also is multifunction. Oops, that's for my OnlyFans. This is all very nebulous, but how difficult is it going to be for you? It depends a lot on the type, brand, etc. rims if you talk to most bike mechanics. My general experience is the wider the rim, often the easier it is with a deeper center channel. Tire type can be important, and we're focusing mainly on road and gravel here, but if you have a tubeless tire versus a tube tire, the tubeless tire, in my opinion, is always going to be more difficult. Then, in gravel, for instance, if you want to run rim inserts or mountain biking or whatever, particularly those bad boys, you can be in a lot of trouble because there's a lot of extra effort, because it's really difficult to remove it because you can't easily get the tire into the center channel. When considering difficulty, you should also consider the skill of the operator of these tire levers or tools. In this case, we're looking at GC Performance. He is a 200-pound man that is a skilled bike mechanic. I am quite sure he can change a tire faster than 99.9% of people watching this video. Even if you're one of my favorite YouTubers, also known as Phil No Upper Body Gains Man, who has a channel that originally was called Worst Retirement Ever, but I call it Worst Upper Body Workout Ever. You probably still have a lot of skill around using those levers to optimize them, etc. If you're relatively new to the whole changing tires business, don't despair. I can certainly tell you that my skills have gone up exponentially over the years I've been in cycling. And you can do that too. It just takes a bit of hard work, but I'm sure you'll get some rewards. For testing, what I first did was I've saved up a lot of tire changing and swapping jobs that were required at the end of the year. And I did, let's call it testing foreplay, on about 8 separate wheels, swapping tires, swapping tubes, and there'll be a click valve video coming up as part of that soon. And then I rested on 3 representative setups for formal testing. And that was the easiest which is a NAR XC wheel, 30 mil wide, with a Forecaster EXO bead. And I've done this for more of my gravel audience, because if you consider, this is pretty analogous to the new trend of running mountain bike tires on wider gravel rims. The next level of difficulty, if I can get this on, you always love that when you set up your props and then the disc rotor gets stuck in the bloody, see if I can get that out. That's what we call the struggle bus. Is a head Ardennes rim with a GP 5000 non-tubeless. And I'll call this a moderate level of effort. And finally, the hardest effort was the same head Ardennes rims with a GP 5000 32 mil tubeless ready. This took a lot of effort. I would even compare it to a double down tire with a rim packed insert, and that'll be another video coming up. In preparation for these tests, I've watched videos on every non-conventional and even some of the conventional tire levers on their method of install. Tests were conducted on my trusty Park WH1, video on that. These are the levers that I did not test on any of the scenarios I've got. For the easiest scenario, I tested the Schwalbe and the bargain basement levers and the gimmick / gadget levers over here. When it came to the moderate test, I've used this Daysaver before, but I tested the lightweight levers and once again the gadget and gimmick ones, and I was curious about this part. All the others I've used before besides for the heavy duty, and I know they work well. When I was doing the hardest setup, I tested everything here except for the Daysaver. I don't plan on subjecting this expensive tool to that sort of condition, so I'm not going to break it. These levers, which are singles, I supplemented with either Schwalbe or the El Cheapo levers. And when it came to the gadgets over here, what I did was I used a single El Cheapo lever to help with them, except for the Tyre Glider, which I just used by itself. For brevity, I'm just going to tell you that all these tire levers up here performed as intended with no issues. I'll highlight the Granite Designs tire lever, which is a favorite carry of mine, because rather than having to carry a separate chain link popper, this works almost as well as the actual tool, unless you're a minimalist and you just want to use construction twine. See my other video on this. Let's first talk about the weakest plastic levers. I was absolutely blown away by the fact that I could even get off the hardest tire rim combination with these $3 Decathlon branded levers. It goes to show you that technique may be just as important as the quality of your lever. These flimsy Schwalbe levers, I took a shot at them earlier, but I also got off the hardest combination with them, and even though they are flimsy, this little rim clip feature works extremely well if a tire is running away from you. So I highly recommend these. These are probably what I'm going to carry along with any of these gimmick type levers as my second lever. The gimmick or gadget levers worked extremely well on the easy and moderate setups. I required assistance with these two levers, or one of them, for the Tire Monkey and the Crank Brothers on the hardest tire setup. The Tyre Glider, I could get it without any help, but I would just say for conservatism, carry an extra lever with the Tyre Glider. The Tyre Monkey is pretty good. I had a little bit of an issue trying to hook the bead sometimes with it, but perseverance got it done every time. And it's really gentle on the hands when you're running it along because there's less risk of you contacting your fingers or hands with the spokes when running the bead around. The Crank Brothers I also liked. I had a little bit of a doubts about how well this bead hook for running it around would work, but it worked completely fine. Also, I had no issues getting underneath the bead with this end. My only criticism of this tool is this handle here. It does protect your hands, but I found it rather awkward and would prefer just a straight shaft like the Tyre Monkey when using it. The Tyre Glider performed exactly as intended. I had some reservations given how wide the hooking flange, let's call it, is for getting underneath the bead, but it seemed to work every time with a little bit of patience. The only criticism I have is when you're running the bead off of the rim, this can be a little stressful on your hands. When you're installing the bead on, also, it can be a little bit stressful. This is going to inspire, along with these others, a longer video just specifically looking at these in more detail, but I would not hesitate to buy the Tyre Glider, and it's definitely the best of these three gimmick gadget type levers. The loser in this test, and the only tire lever I would not recommend, is the Premio by Silca. Regrettably, it was the only tire lever that managed to fail during the test. You can see that the alloy insert here is bent. No other tire lever in the test had this happen to them, and this was under the hardest scenario. I didn't even notice it until I was putting them back together. The other thing is, it scratches rims. Now, I'm going to get into this in more detail, and to be fair to it, of course, the Park Tool one would too. But this lever is going to inspire another video on Silca's marketing. Summing this up, in probably the 6 hours of time I've been playing around with the various tire and rim combinations, is that technique is probably more important than your tools, because all of the tools worked. And what blew me away in the surprise was these Schwalbe flimsy levers, and how, if you're careful, they can work in the most difficult of situations. The clear winner of the test, as long as you bring a spare lever with it, in my opinion, is the Tyre Glider as advertised. And the loser, the Silca, I keep mispronouncing it, levers. And these have inspired another video. I'm going to also do a little bit more in-depth video on the gimmick or gadget levers, probably in a month or two, just to go through them in more detail and also provide some recommendations on how I would improve them to their manufacturers. So with that, if you've made it this far, like, subscribe, and if you've got any questions or comments or disagree with me, light me up down below.
Now that is a closing when you can freeze a frame like that. I forgot to mention, ride hard. Happy New Year too.